Your ears do not deceive you. You have just entered the Cryptid Creator Corner brought to you by your friends at Comic Book Yeti. So without further ado, let's get on to the interview.
Hey, comics fam. Whether you are a longtime listener or a veteran catching the show today, all are welcome here. When we started this podcast, inclusion and diversity were at the forefront of what we wanted to cover and promote with it. So in June, we'll be celebrating Pride Month for our second year in a row, featuring an amazing group of queer creators and their projects. One of those projects is from our friends at Lifeline Comics. Following their success with By Visibility Still By, Herology, and Rainbow Canvas, Lifeline Comics is launching their newest queer anthology, Transphoria, a trans and non-binary anthology, on May the 30th. The 90-page graphic novel will contain 19 stories all about trans and non-binary experiences of gender euphoria, crossing all genres like slice of life, supernatural, romance, science fiction, anime, and beyond. Featuring a vibrant display of artistic styles and storytelling techniques, Transphoria is a testament to the creativity and talent of its contributors. From sci-fi striking stories to endearing romantic ventures, this graphic novel celebrates trans stories while delivering a powerful message of empowerment and affirmation. I'll put a link in the show notes so you can check it out. As always, thanks for listening and have a glorious Pride Month helping us celebrate. Y'all, Jimmy, the Chaos Goblin, strikes again. I should have known better than to mention I was working on my DC Universe meets Ravenloft hybrid D&D campaign on social media. My bad. He goes and tags a bunch of comics creators we know, and now I have to get it in gear and whip this campaign into shape so we can start playing. Another friend chimes in, "Are you going to make maps?" It's fair to say it's been a while since I put something together, so I guess? It was then that I discovered Arkenforge. If you don't know who Arkenforge is, they have everything you need to make your TTRPG more fun and immersive, allowing you to build, play, and export animated maps, including in-person Fog of War capability that lets your players interact with maps as the adventure unfolds while you, the DM, get the full picture. Now I'm set to easily build high-res animated maps, saving myself precious time and significantly adding nuance to our campaign. That's a win every day in my book. Check them out at arkenforge.com and use the discount code YETI5 to get $5 off. I'll drop a link in the show notes for you, and big thanks to Arkenforge for partnering with our show. I think I'm going to make Jimmy play a Goblin Warlock just to get even.
Hello, and welcome to Comic Book Yeti's Cryptid Creator Corner. I'm one of your hosts, Jimmy Gasparro, and I believe this is the third time, I think, this young man is on the podcast. But comic creator extraordinaire, one of my absolute favorites. I also think one of the most productive comic book writers, just looking at the slate of stuff he has coming out this summer on his newsletter, which you should all sign up for if you haven't yet. But we're going to get into it. We already had Chris Batista on to talk a little bit about Gatchaman, which this guest is currently writing. But please, welcome back to the podcast, Cullen Bunn. Cullen, how you doing?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me. Young man may be the first time I came on and talked to you, but that's not the case anymore. Not physically, not mentally, not spiritually. No longer am I a young man.
All right. Well, I was,
but I appreciate it. I thank you for the attempt to make me feel better.
Well, I try. I try and be accommodating here on the podcast. So Chris was already on. I had a really nice chat with Chris. That episode's I think I'll probably figure out a way to have these combined or come out the same day. But Gatchaman, it's coming out through Man Cave Studios. Issue number 1 is set to drop June 26th, a few weeks away from when we're recording this. And yes, I was telling Chris, it wasn't a property that I was really familiar with, but I kind of started to look into it and was really surprised by the life that this thing had. Like, not just the original cartoon, but there were several iterations over the years, especially in like the US market. I think it was Sandy Frank Entertainment at one point.
Oh, yeah.
And then there were a few different attempts to kind of bring, I think what was like Battle of the Planets and, a couple other like iterations of it. And but getting into what Gatchaman is kind of all about. And I was curious as to what was your initial exposure to it? Like, were you familiar with this from, the mid to late 70s when it was on in the US?
I was. When I watched it as a kid, it was Battle of the Planets.
Okay.
And I don't know that people who weren't in second grade when that show was coming on the air have any idea how big that was for us, for the kids. I mean, we rode the bus home and we were all excited and praying that there weren't any delays so we'd get home just in time to see Battle of the Planets come on. We used to argue over who was the cool in the playground, who was the coolest member of G-Force on Battle of the Planets. And I'm talking knockdown, drag out fights over these G-Force characters.
Oh, wow.
It was really, these days we have Star Wars shows and we have Marvel shows. We have all these different things. When I was a kid, Battle of the Planets was the closest thing I had to a show that was like, oh, this is as cool as Star Wars. It was like really a big deal for me. So yeah, I've been familiar with it for a long time. And then I fell out of it, as time passed, the show went off the air.
Oh, sure.
I didn't really follow it beyond that, but I knew that I do know that it came out as a couple of different versions of the show. I mean, re-edited again. And then I found out about the original run, in Japan and how long, what a long life it had and sort of this long history. And there've been live action movies and anime, original anime releases and everything else. So when they called me and asked if I was familiar, if I was interested in Gatchaman, I would really, there was very little hesitation from me that I wanted to be involved in the comic.
Oh, that's awesome. There have been, I think, some other comic, versions before. I think wasn't there one involving like Alex Ross doing covers?
Yeah, that was it not Skybound, but it was one of the Image imprints did it, and yeah, it had these great Alex Ross covers on it. And there was even a gold key comic of Battle of the Planets back in the day.
Yeah, I remember reading about that.
Yeah.
But, being involved in it, really liking it as a kid, and then having this opportunity, is great to like leave your stamp on it. But in doing my research, having not been familiar with this, I was really kind of surprised because you can find on YouTube, like back-to-back edits of the original and then the US version. And it's remarkable how maybe darker is the wrong word, but the original Japanese version like truly does not pull like any punches. There was a lot of stuff edited for the US version where they would have like this robot come in and do like a little interstitial connecting the scenes when they took stuff out. Was there anything when you started to get into, because this is kind of adapting the original property, was there anything surprising that you were really like, man, I remember this scene as a kid and the original plays much different?
Over the years, I'd heard stories of the original, right? So I knew going in that it was going to be a little more mature, a little darker, right? And look, I love that little robot. His name was 7 Zark 7, and I thought it was awesome. But he's not part of Gatchaman. He's baked in Battle of the Planets.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's there's stuff in that so when I rewatched the show to prepare for the comic, even though I was prepared, I was like, wow, they went there, they're like, Team Gatchaman's trying to rescue some scientists. And the bad guy's like, well, here they are. Come and get them. Oh, we killed them a long time ago. And we've just been weekend at burning their corpses around. And it's just, it was pretty, it had some dark moments and some violent moments. The team didn't flinch away from killing a fool if they had to,
right?
In Gatchaman. So yeah, there was a little bit of that. Even though I was prepared for it, that surprised me. And there was, at some point over the years, there was all these rumors about what happened in the Japanese version of Gatchaman. So I was prepared for that event, how it all wrapped up. But honestly, the first series didn't wrap up that way. It still wrapped up in a really dark way. What I felt was a dark way, but it wasn't. That wasn't the ending that I'd always heard about as a kid. So there were some things that kind of took me aback.
Yeah, I that doesn't surprise me. Like digging into the difference between the Japanese and the U.S. version. So when you actually get involved in this and start, with Mad Cave and Chris is on board, and I told Chris, I mean, this thing looks so sleek. Like his interpretation of these designs, kind of capturing the original show but putting like his own stamp on it, and the colors are phenomenal. Yeah. When you start to get into it and like really figure out like what this story is going to be and start to script it, because I mean, you've done a lot of different things, but I would say probably most known for horror comics, whereas Gatchaman is really, although it might have some darker elements, but really more sci-fi action adventure.
Sure.
I would say. Do you have to like restrain yourself and pull back from pushing into that direction, or are you pretty good with? No, I know what this is. I know what I want it to be.
There have been situations where, I have to pull back, but with Gatchaman, I kind of had a vision of what I wanted to do and how I wanted it to feel. And I'm very aware of it feeling like it belongs in the universe of the original animated series. So I don't know that I ever felt like, oh no, too much horror, because I don't think I ever leaned into the horror elements of this. Yes, there are things, when you've got these giant mecha running around, destroying cities, there are inherently horrible moments. But I really wanted it to feel a lot more like the animated series. I wanted it to be, I knew going in, I wanted it to be appealing to longtime fans of Gatchaman, but also appealing to new fans who had never even heard of Gatchaman. And I wanted it to appeal to older readers as well as younger readers. So I kind of just kept all those things in mind with it as I kind of outlined what I wanted to do.
And as you started to flesh out the actual script from the outline, was that, a more difficult process than, one of your creator-owned properties? I mean, I know that I think there was maybe more of an editorial process, because I think the original Tatsunoko Productions is still kind of involved. So I didn't know if that impacts how you script or how you create the issues.
It doesn't impact the scripting as much as it does the, I'm sure we've talked about this many times. I go through so many different outlining stages before I get to script.
Right.
It doesn't impact the scripting as much as it impacts those initial, very early outlines, because Tatsunoko has to sign off on those, and they are very, they're very dedicated to this. Must uphold the brand of Gatchaman, and it must, we want it to fit in that world. We want it to fit in that, we want it to feel right. So they were very hands-on. But when I say that, I don't want you to think they ever. Every time you get involved with a licensed property, it's always, I hold my breath. How rough is this going to be? How difficult is this going to be? But they've been so great to work with. I mean, there were a couple of big notes that they gave me right off the bat. Like, initially, I pitched it as a sequel to the first series, and they didn't want that. They're like, no, we want it to this has to take place within the first 100 and however many episodes, 105, 120 episodes.
Okay.
So then I had to think about, how do I make it its own thing, even though it's taking place within that framework? How do I introduce some things that are going to make readers wonder how things are going to shake out, how the characters will, survive, how the characters will get through this unscathed. And I did introduce some big swing elements that I was actually a little surprised that they were like, yeah, go for it. They were, they gave some notes on it, but they weren't egregious notes. They weren't like, go back to the drawing board. They were really on board with some of these big ideas. Their notes were more about, just making sure it plays well with what they want to do with the property.
Oh, that's great. I mean, that sounds like it's, you know, a much easier process than, you know, what it could have been in your night.
Yeah, and there have been moments like I was writing one of the scripts just a few days ago, and I sent my editor. I said, "Hey, I want to do this. Do you think they're going to approve it, or should I just scratch that?" And he's no, they're going to approve. He said they'll approve that. He said that they're open to it. Just you know, but I was a little nervous because it was some things that maybe they wouldn't like.
Yeah. Well, I can't wait to read the further issues and figure out. I can guess what that might have been. You know, you said you would get in like playground or on the bus fights talking about the show, you know, like your favorite character. Writing them, did that change from childhood at all? Were you like, oh, you know what, getting in and now writing June or somebody?
It really did. It really did, because as a kid, the character of Ken, who was called Mark when I was a kid, it was Mark, and the character of Joe, who was called Jason when I was a kid. Oh, it was a classic Han Solo versus Luke Skywalker debate. Like, you know, who's cooler?
Right.
And Ken the Eagle, he is Gatchaman, the leader of the team. And he's a cool character. I mean, he's awesome.
Yeah.
But as a kid, and that's what I liked as a kid. But my best friend liked Jason because he was the rebel, and he was the guy who always stood out and was containing his unbridled rage at all times. But weirdly, now June is my favorite. I think June is the best character of the bunch. I think she's the most fun to write. I think doing some things with, like, I mean, I've said this before. Like, we've got. You remember the old issue of the X-Men where Wolverine gets separated from the rest of the team, and it has this great image at the end of the issue, and he's like, "Now it's my turn." And then he's like, the tagline was "Wolverine fights alone." Next issue.
Yeah.
So I got to do some of that with June, and I'm like, "Oh, this is the greatest. This is awesome." Now June gets to fight alone. You know, I like seeing all the characters together, but and so this could change as I write other stories that have characters kind of on their own. It might, my preference might shift. But writing a couple issues where June was the lead and she was really, you know, digging in and doing her own thing, it made me really appreciate her character a lot more.
Oh, that's interesting. I'll be curious to see as it progresses if that, you know, changes once again. Reading the first issue, I mean, you know, it's one of those things where there's a lot of stuff that I, you know, because of my age, never really got into. Like when folks come on here who are younger comic creators, and they talk about their influences being like Mighty Morphin Power Rangers or things along those lines. You know, that kind of missed me. But the thing about Gatchaman is it's very reminiscent of a lot of stuff. But when you start to read it, and then I had the like dawning realization, like, oh, this is what everything is kind of like playing off of. You know, like Voltron, Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, like the team of five, everybody having their own color, personality, you know?
The really sort of Boy Scout good leader and the rebel leader, and, you know, or the rebellious member, all those things. I trace a lot of stuff we take for granted back to Gatchaman, really.
Yeah. And then my favorite character of every team is the chubby guy from blue collar background. So I think it's the owl in Gatchaman. I know
Ryu. Yeah, Ryu. When I was a kid, he was called Tidy. In Battle of the Planets, his name was Tiny.
But I read him and I'm like, that's my guy right there.
Yeah, I like him too, because he's. I just always like he's the guy who's like, we're just gonna clobber you. Let's clobber him. You know, he's like the Ben Grimm of Gatchaman. He doesn't get off the jet a lot in the series. He's not off the God Phoenix very often, but I think I'll get him off the God Phoenix a bit too.
I mean, I love that name though. I mean, what a name for a ship, you know?
Yeah, the God Phoenix. It takes it's like, you know what? We do not care. We're just going to let you know we're awesome. Deal with it. Yeah,
absolutely. No, but I wanted to say, I told Chris the same thing. It's a really, really fun, like, first issue. I mean, it's It's not overly exposition heavy, gives you enough flavor. And even the issue 0, which I think was like the free comic book day issue. Yeah, really fun. I mean, a lot of action. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, it's I wanted it to, like I said, I wanted both the 0 issue and issue 1 to be very new reader friendly. And that, and the cartoon has like some exposition, it'll start and say, this is who Gatchaman is. And they'll tell. So I kind of embrace that voice a little bit in the comic, and I continue to do that, but I try not to be too heavy. But the thing with it, doing it in a comic, is getting all those ideas out there in like 22 pages. They're ninja. They're, they have special ships that all merge into one ship, and they fight mecha, all those things that, so that issue's really packed. And all praise to Chris, because he just has drawn. I mean, he just draws the hell out of it.
Yeah.
And I couldn't ask for a better partner on how he depicts those things. And there's some of it's just little things that I can't even say were in the script. They might have been, but I don't remember writing it this way. It might be in the 0 issue. There's a scene where Ken the Eagle's jet streaks down through the streets. And it's spinning, and it's knocking bad guys all around as it spins through the streets.
Yeah,
and I'm pretty sure the spin was Chris, but he got so much motion in that page. Yeah, I just thought it was cool. It's interesting because their ships don't have weapons in Gatchaman, at least not where we are in Gatchaman timeline. So the ship doesn't have I couldn't write. He strafes them with laser beams. So he has to batter them with the wings of his jet.
I told Chris I thought I was most impressed with how he got the mask. Because especially there's one, I don't know if it's a full page or a double page spread where the whole team is coming down from above.
Yeah,
I was asking, did you have the 3D model of those? Because that looks insanely difficult.
Yeah, he's written me a few. He's written a few emails saying that I'm trying to kill him with these scripts, and I am not trying to kill him with the scripts. But sometimes I can see that I may be being a little malicious. Maybe I have some. I like Chris a great deal, but maybe I have some resentment or something. I don't know.
Might be. Just
I resent that talent, so I'd have to punish.
You have to be hard on him a little bit.
Yeah.
You can't make it. You make it too easy.
Right.
And so with Gatchaman, as you kind of script along, has the I'm trying to figure out what I want to say here. Has your overall outline shifted as you write it, or are you able to stay? Because you do, as you mentioned and have discussed before, your outline process. Do you kind of adhere pretty religiously to it once it's set? But do you leave yourself some room?
Yeah, I always leave enough room. I have the big story beats are there, and then I always try to leave enough room that I can shift things around, or something surprises me. I can roll with that. And that happened even in the first arc. I got to a point where I'm like, okay, I've written myself into a corner. Now, how do I get us out? And there were story elements that I'd already seeded into it that I realized, oh, this is how I get out of there. But it wasn't what I was planning initially. So there's always a little room to shift things around.
Okay. I know with the original series, there was at least from what I've read, a kind of a focus on conservation, environmentalism, technology. I don't know if you can say, I don't want it to spoil anything, but are those elements something that you still needed to incorporate or wanted to incorporate?
Yeah, definitely. There's a heavy science element, because both Gatchaman and the International Science Organizations, who their sponsor are technically, obviously it's right there in the title. But then Galactor is also using science. The bad guys, Galactor, are using science almost like like they're using science as an instrument of terrorism. So it's interesting to me that it shows these two different sides of science and how it can be used for good or evil, and that's baked in. And yeah, the conservation environmentalism, that's baked in it as well. The scripts I've written so far, it's not like I lean into it and say, let me make some sort of, political or environmental statement, but I don't have to. It's in the, it's what the characters were always about. So that comes across in the writing, I think. And that's not to say the next story I write might be very, sort of put that in the forefront.
Right.
Especially with the first arc, though, I just wanted mainly for it to be a fun, science ninja adventure.
Well, accomplished, because it is. I said it. It is just so much fun, and it really, especially watching some of the clips I found on YouTube, and I think it's available somewhere on some streaming service. But
I imagine it is.
It made me very curious to watch the original Japanese run. Which I think is kind of interesting how the comic, can do that. And then also the comic in and of itself, I just thought was great. I really like that Man Cave is really bringing back a lot of fun properties in an interesting way. I mean, this is kind of along the same lines of what they're doing with Dick Tracy and Flash Gordon.
Right.
And there's some other things. But
yeah,
it's been like a really fun spring and into summer to see the things that have been around for a while, kind of getting new life breathed into them. And it's not just like a rehash of, hey, you like this thing? I feel like every creative team is not just trading off of nostalgia, because I think that falls flat. It might be great for like an issue or two, but you really have to have a solid story. And so far, I feel like that's what everybody's doing. And it's very exciting to see.
Yeah, I think everybody really wanted to do something different with it. I think, my series is probably the most traditional Gatchaman series. And then, there are other mini-series that are coming out in one-shots. And some of those are really, they're really cool stories that they're cooking up. And they're definitely very different than what you might expect. And Tatsunaka's is so open to us, getting into elements that are never touched on in the animated series. Like how does Galactor select and train their minions, and who gets to wear those cool masks that they have, and who gets, and so we're able to explore all of that kind of stuff.
Oh, that's awesome.
And fill in those blanks.
Oh, I like that. That's pretty cool. I wanted to just turn slightly. I think I've said this the other two times you've been on, but I think you have one of the best newsletters in like all of comic books, if not anybody in any type of like entertainment situation. I mean, your newsletter is always jam-packed with fantastic stuff.
Maybe too jam-packed, but yeah, thank you. I mean, the newsletter is interesting because I've done one for years, and I really just never liked doing it. And then, I don't know, a couple of years ago, I changed sort of the tone where I was like, I'm just going to put it all out on the table. This is me. And since I started doing that, I've really enjoyed the newsletter. And there were a couple of weeks where things were rough and I missed it. And I was getting twitchy that I had missed my newsletter.
Well, I really like your formatting for it. I mean, every newsletter is a little bit of like a snapshot into like your life, your thought process, like what's going on, like highs and lows. I feel like you're very like open in it.
A lot of lows too.
Well,
if people don't like me and they want to see me suffer or hear about how I'm suffering from time to time, this is the newsletter for you.
I don't know if that's the case, but I mean, I feel you're very open in the newsletter. And then you go through, you talk about some of the stuff that you are working on, some of the stuff you have coming out. You talk about some of the games you're playing or what you're reading, what you're watching. I really enjoy it. I subscribe to like a bunch of different newsletters, and it's one of the ones I always try and make sure that I read and go through.
Well, thank you.
And check out. And I just wanted to touch on a little bit because the most recent newsletter with things to come, of all the stuff that you have coming out.
Oh, that one, yeah.
I mean, it's a pretty impressive summer. So Gatchaman #1, but you're also involved with, I think, Door to Door Night by Night, Volume 2 is coming out. Deadpool Kills the Marvel Universe, Ghost Lore #11, Monsters Are My Business, which is such a fun series. I think #3. Yeah, I mean, and then into July and August, I guess Arkham Horrors coming out sometime in August.
I forgot they're coming out. I need to revisit that newsletter.
Yeah. I mean, I'll put a link to it in the show notes so folks can see everything that you have coming out. And I also love what you've been playing in the game aspect of it. I also like that. I think it's Arkham Horror that has like a board game component to it too. And I know a friend of mine, I think, just got the Harrow County game so that we can finally play that. We're super excited about that. I think my friend Dan might try and review it for Comic Book Yeti.
It's a cool game. It's a fun game. And it has such a neat, sort of unique play style, and is very different than a lot of other board games, and has a lot of replayability value, I think. But yeah, that's exciting having that comic go into a different format. And then Arkham Horror, I guess I'm writing I write a lot of comics of board games now, because Arkham Horror that's been a board game since I was very, very, I was very young when that game came out originally. And it's gone through many iterations, and now it's like a card game / board game that I still enjoy. I mean, I just like the setting. So that's another one where when the editor called me and was like, "Have you ever heard of Arkham Horror?" And I was like, my feelings would have been really hurt if you didn't ask me to write Arkham Horror. So,
oh, that's pretty funny. Is there anything in particular that you've been, playing now? Have you had an opportunity to sneak in any games or anything?
I haven't had a big chance to play a lot of new board games lately. And that's the only thing, is I've got a closet out here full of board games that are maybe most of them are never going to get played. But I've been, I have been playing stuff. I've been playing some video game stuff in preparation for a comic that I'm writing that hasn't been announced yet. So I've been playing a game. It's fun when I get to play a game and say, "Oh no, this is work." So I've been playing a game for prep for a comic.
Nice.
I've been developing some card games with some people, so I've been play testing and playing those games a lot.
Oh, that's fun.
Playing games. It's just not a purely recreational. It's not purely recreational. I still play Dungeons and Dragons with my friends, but that's not a new. That's not a new thing.
Yeah, I recently played the D&D Onslaught board game. I don't know if you've ever.
Yeah, I know the game. I haven't played it.
Yeah, which is more so it kind of takes a little bit of the role playing out of it. It's like a board game, more so like the fighting. And but I thought it was a lot of fun, though. I thought if you, that was a good time. And recently at a barbecue, I played Blank Slate, which is kind of like a fun party game.
No, I don't know Blank Slate.
It's like there's cards with a blank on it, like home blank. And then everyone puts down an answer. And if you match up with one person, you both write home run, you get 3 points. If you match up with more than one person, so 3 people write home run, you only get 1 point. So you score points based upon matching with somebody, but you can't match with too many people. So you have to pick a not quite obvious answer, but not obscure that no one will have it, and you get no points. So it's kind of like a fun.
Oh, I'm gonna write that down. That sounds like a great party game for people who don't like geeky stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the one you can break out when people don't like the nerd stuff, and they don't want to have you explain, how to play some game for half an hour. That you pull out the rule book and you're like, "Is that War and Peace? What do you?"
Right. Yeah, I'm really even though I like board games, I hate learning to play board games. I need someone to. I don't want to read a rule book anymore. I those days are over for me.
Yeah.
I just want someone to tell me how to do it. I did buy a game. I haven't played it, but all my friends seem excited about it. It's called Gaslands, and it's like a war game, sort of a Mad Max type universe. But the gimmick of it is you get Matchbox cars and you glue little weapon systems and machine guns and missiles onto it, and then paint your Matchbox car, and then you duke it out. So I'm excited to glue some weapons on a Matchbox car and paint it up.
That's pretty cool. I played one similar. I haven't played Gaslands. I played one similar called Radland.
Okay.
So, it's like a one-on-one, kind of like, I guess, like a combat-y game, with like a card system. So you can play different cards against your opponent. And it does remind me of Mad Max because there are little like coins or tablets that represent like water. So if you play the right number of cards, they'll give you things like water that allow you to do other things in the game. So it's kind of but Radlands is a lot of fun. But I like the idea of being able to paint my own for Gaslands. I'm gonna have to look into that to paint my own little Matchbox car and
glue some weapons onto it. I went out in the garage and found all my kids' old Matchbox cars, and I picked all the ones I think need to be souped up.
Oh, that's fun. Yeah, I just looked it up on Board Game Geek. Yeah. Gaslands, post-apocalyptic vehicular combat. All right.
So I'm excited to try that one when things settle down just a little bit.
Yeah, that looks like a lot of fun. Yeah, I've been to PAX Unplugged in Philly twice now, and with my friend Dan, who is kind of like the DM, and he's the one that brings over all the games. Like he brings over a big bag every time, and it just depends on what you want to play. It's like, do you want to play a real in-depth game? Do you want to do this? Do you want to play a quick card game? And he's introduced me to so many, fun games. But going to PAX Unplugged, like walking around and seeing the folks that are playtesting stuff or that are creating new things, and it's just amazing. Like,
oh yeah, I think those conventions are real inspiring for creativity. I haven't been to PAX, but I've been to Gen Con many times, and just walking around and seeing all the games, it always gets me kind of pumped up.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. I enjoy it. We try and have like at least once or twice a month a game night where like some people will come over and we'll play, and the kids will come too, and we try and have games for for the kids as well. So because they don't want to sit there and play D&D Onslaught,
Right.
What's your convention list look like this summer?
It's pretty light, to be honest. I'm not doing San Diego or anything like that. I'm doing a couple of smaller shows. I'm doing a show called AuthorCon in St. Louis. That's like a horror. It's a charity convention, but it's very horror focused. So I'm excited for that one. But this year the rest of this year is pretty light in terms of conventions. And then next year, I don't know. I think I'm going to. I was just talking to some other creators, and I really do. I need to focus, the kinds of conventions I go to, and what I love conventions, but they can also be huge time wasters if I'm not careful. And getting the work done is always an issue. So there are some conventions that maybe I've made habits of going to in the past that maybe I need to skip out on for a couple of years, make people more interested in seeing me, make them miss me a little bit. Okay. And there's conventions in areas that I've never gone to. And that's the other side of things is I need to look at where have I been to conventions, where have I not been to conventions, and look at that. So it's on my my to-do list before the end of the year is to really figure out a convention plan for next year.
Kind of be a little more strategic about it.
Yeah, I mean, it's I hate putting strategy on on something like that, but I almost have to because they're fun. I almost always have a good time at these conventions. It's just a matter of how do I get the most, even if I'm not paying to go to the convention, they can be expensive trips, and I need to figure out how I'm getting the most out of those trips.
Oh yeah, I mean I think that makes a lot of sense. Sometimes you have to do that to make sure it's worthwhile. I mean, getting all the stuff and heading there, and even if you're sitting at somebody else, in a publisher's booth, like it's still a lot, and it's a lot of time. That's like a whole day on the convention floor, and if you're seeing people for dinner and later on, I'm sure
they can be exhausting. I mean, a good exhausting, but exhausting,
right.
But exhausting.
I wanted to ask you about one of the things before I let you go. You were kind of doing like what was it, a bourbon or a whiskey event that you were?
So yeah, there's a local convention here where I live that I'm part of the board, that I'm on the board for. And one of the things we did to kind of promote the convention, but also it's a charity convention, so also to promote the charities that we're supporting, is once a month I go to this local bar, and we call it Whiskey and Words, and we invite writers to come in, and I just give them writers prompts, prompts to write little stories, and an index card that like a larger index card for them to write, to start writing their stories, and then they can share them with us, and there's prizes, and it's usually just a good time and a good excuse for writers who don't necessarily interact with one another to get together and hang out and have a good time. It's a lot like a drink and draw, just there's no drawing involved.
Yeah, writing.
But yeah, we've been doing that, and it's been a lot of fun. And I've even had, there's been a couple of writers who are like, I was stuck on a story I've been working on, and this is using one of these prompts, and these prompts are absolutely ridiculous. But they're like, using one of these prompts, I was able to crack that story. So great, go for it, go with God.
You enjoy that type of interaction with doing something like that?
I do. I mean, it can be exhausting, and it's a lot. It's more work than people think it is. But I just I enjoy hanging out with other creative people, and it's fun just to throw out these ridiculous concepts and let them go for it.
Right. Yeah. No, that when I was reading about that, I thought that sounded great. That sounded like a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's we've only done we've done 3 of them so far, and we're still trying, we're still working some of the bugs out of the system, but it's been pretty awesome.
Oh, that's great. Hopefully folks who are nearby will get a chance to check that out. But I have to head off to a deposition, but Cullen, I really appreciate you being flexible and us able to work this out. It was great talking to Chris, and great again talking to you about this.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, Gatchaman #1 from Mad Cape Studios, June 26th. It's a fantastic creative team. Cullen Bunn, Chris Batista, Carlos Lopez, and Buddy Bedoin is lettering. So go get that. Make sure your LCS knows that you want it on June 26th. And I'll have a link to Cullen's newsletter. And he's a Discord, and like just so many great ways to interact with the fan, and so active. Like the Discord is unbelievably active. It's really great to see.
Too much. I gotta.
Well, thank you very much. Shout out to my brother Bobby, the Cryptid Creator Corner's #1 most dedicated fan. Bobby listens to all my episodes, especially I think he listens to the Cullen Bunn once twice. And I appreciate you folks listening.
All right, everybody, don't go anywhere. We got the second part of Gatchaman coming up. Jimmy's chat with artist Chris Batista. Hey, comics fam. Indie comic book publisher Band of Bars just got a level up and announced it is now a cooperative. This heralds a new era for them, including a partnership with Dauntless Stories. And they added several new members to the ownership group. Marcus Jimenez is now Chief Operating Officer, Brent Fisher takes on the role of Chief Diversity Officer, and Joey Galvez is introduced as Head of Kickstarter Ops and Social Media Manager, which is sure to increase their capabilities overall as a publisher. And it further promotes their mission statement of advancing representation, inclusion, and diversity in the media. They also established a new board of directors to help chart the new path of their journey. With new projects in the works like Alas Goodbye dropping in June, Unbroken soon launching on Kickstarter, and Pawn coming up with Dauntless, stay tuned to this space for more exciting news from the growing Bards family.
Hello, and welcome to Comic Book Yeti's Cryptid Creator Corner. I'm one of your hosts, Jimmy Gasparo, and I got a super fun podcast episode for you today. I am chatting with artist Chris Batista.
Hey,
and Chris has been in comics for a little bit. He's done some things. And but we are here to talk about, there is a new series from Mad Cave, Gatchaman, which is based off of the early 70s, I think like 71, 72, Science Ninja Team Gatchaman anime. And we're going to talk about that. Chris is the artist on it. Cullen Bunn is writing. Carlos Lopez is doing the coloring. And Buddy Bedoin is handling the lettering. I think issue 1 is going to drop June 26th. And they have a lot planned out with this series. There's, I think, a couple of like one-shots and offshoots. So they're really doing a lot with it. I'm excited to hear all about it. But please welcome Chris to the podcast. Chris, how you doing?
I'm good. I'm very, very good. And it's like your description of it was kind of on point. And I think it's necessary to mention that Gatchaman was first introduced to U.S. audiences in, I think, around 76, 77. And it's around the Star Wars era. And it was known as Battle of the Planets in its first incarnation. That's what most of us fans were first familiar with. And there was no internet or anything like that. You had to find these things out. Like, oh, it's a different name. It's all this stuff. But yeah, it was a very popular show in the 70s. And then for those of us who wanted to know more, that's when we found out that it was actually called Gatchaman, and that in a lot of ways was very different from what we had originally seen on TV.
Yeah, I was not familiar with it. I mean, I'm 45 now, so it just kind of like missed me. I think when the Battle of the Planets, which was, like you said, was like 77, 78, when it was on in the US, I think I was probably a little too young for it. And I know it's been around a few times. Like, I was shocked, having not really been familiar with it, how many times the original, Science Ninja Team Gatchaman was adapted. It's something I mentioned briefly before you and I started recording, but there was Battle of the Planets, which I think Sandy Frank Entertainment is what brought it to the US after Star Wars. But also there was a Gatchaman 2, a Gatchaman Fighter. There's been different iterations after Battle of the Planets. There was also G-Force. There was, I think Saban did Eagle Riders.
Yeah, when Sandy Frank originally did it, he only adapted the first season.
Yeah,
and he didn't put all the episodes in. I think it was like missing like 30 episodes, and it had been edited down because they had to edit a lot of violence out. Yeah. And he thought that since Star Wars was such a big craze, they had to put in some slight Star Wars elements, like to make it seem like they were doing stuff in outer space, when it's actually, it's all based on Earth anyway. And they had to pump up some of those elements. And like I said, tone down some of the violence, which, I mean, there's still plenty of butt kicking in it, but there was like things taking out of there where one of the lead characters would kill people with a feather. Which was the coolest thing, but you wouldn't see that on an American show. And like there were 2 more seasons, but they never adapted them. So I'm not sure why, because I remember it was quite a popular show. But I think they had enough episodes, like 80 or so, for a syndication package. And I guess they didn't feel the need to do any more with it because it kept making them money. But that was, that's what made me, I was aware of that. And I would get like old books from Japan where I'd see these different looking characters, like, wait, there was more. And, we'd have to go to comic conventions, stuff like that to find all of this stuff. There was no internet, We
yeah.
Oh yeah, and we had to like find books where there's no translations and just try to figure it out from there. Sometimes we were wrong, sometimes we were right. But I still have a book from that era where they took a couple of Gatchaman episodes and they made them into these photo novels, which are so awesome from Japan. And mine is, I'm shocked, it's still in great condition. It was like
that's cool.
the holy grail.
Yeah.
And
you can still find on YouTube, because I was looking at it, preparing for the interview, like some of the original clips of Gatchaman compared to the Battle of the Planet adaptation, because you're right, they edited out some things due to violence. They did do some, like, they had a new robot character that kind of like was almost acted at, like, if there was a scene they couldn't show, to kind of stitch some of the original scenes together.
Yeah, they kill some time with him,
Right. And then they had all new voice actors and changed a lot of the stuff. And I was curious, is like, how different did it look? And I did find a video on YouTube that was like comparing a scene where two characters essentially explode and destroy everything around them. And then they show the Battle of the Planets version, and it's so sanitized. It's like, they're not dead. They're somewhere else. Love conquers everything. You have this very strange voiceover.
One of the biggest changes was that the lead bad guy is actually a trans character. He the guy, they called him Zoltar in the American version. And he had this voice, and and in Japan he's known as Berkatzi, which was a German for mountain cat. Like, if you look at his mask, it's actually very cat-like. I didn't catch that as a kid, but nowadays I think it's cool as hell. But as a kid, what, Berkatzi? But okay. But what it was that the bad guy, the real bad guy behind everything, that was known as Luminous One in the American version, but he's known as Leader X, and he's an alien intelligence that just wants to kill all of us. It's like, really, like, just, he wants it out for us. And he took two twins when they were born, and he fused them into one person, and which is really messed up. And he made him one person. So he had like, he was a character that could shift his gender at will. He could become a man and a woman. And in the show, they would never, in the Japanese show, they left you all sorts of hints. In the American show, they just didn't go anywhere near that. But in the Japanese version, he's ultimately, as much as he's a psychotic bad guy, he's actually a complete victim of the villain himself, because his childhood was taken from him, and he went through life like his not being able to control his gender swapping abilities. He didn't know what was wrong with him. So, like, if you write him properly, you can see that, he's crazy, but like, this is what happened to him. And you could not do that in an American show in the 70s.
Right. Yeah. I thought I read at one point they made it two characters. So it was like they were a brother and sister or something.
I think they did something like that. And, and it was, you with writing, you would never know anyway. But yeah, the Japanese did some crazy stuff in the 70s, man. They did not, like, one of the things when I did a rewatch of the entire series as a primer, because when they had gotten the rights to the show, it took a few months to work some things out. So in the meantime, I was just keeping a sketchbook, and I was watching the entire series just to refamiliarize myself with it. And it was just, they would casually try to commit genocide almost every episode. It's like, and they would be like, oh, the new thing showed up in that city. And they would use recycled footage of that city being wiped off the map, tornadoes, earthquakes, people running in the street. This happened all the time on the show. And they would hint at it in the American version. But I remember watching it going, damn, this is a rough show. Like, you look at it initially, it looks all cutesy and stuff, but it had some teeth to it.
Some of the clips I saw, the original one, like in Japanese with, English subtitles. So it wasn't the Battle of the Planets like the original Gatchaman. The action sequences were great. Like, the animation is really cool.
Oh my God. Like, for a show that was done in the 70s, since I had to study the show. A lot of times I'm just looking at some images where I'm doing freeze capture. And for a show that had a limited budget, and their drawings, like, how I became such a huge fan as a kid was that we had Scooby-Doo and things like that. And we had our standouts, like the original Johnny Quest show was art. It was a beautiful show, more adult storytelling. But the shows that were like running the gamut in American TVs were like Scooby-Doo and things like that, which are so popular. But I couldn't get into them. It was essentially the same episode every time. And it would have got away if it weren't for those blasted kids. Fred and Daphne would go, I couldn't stand it. I'd watch an episode of Battle of the Planets, and they beat the hell out of the bad guy. They didn't mess around. They had cool ships. They did crazy things. They had these amazing, cool costumes. They had long hair. They were just cooler in every way than the American shows were. And I didn't realize at the time that was the Japanese attempt at doing American superheroes. That was their inspiration. That they were like, we were taking the capes and things like that, and they were doing it better, in my opinion, because we also had Super Friends, and Super Friends was very much like a patty cake version of Justice League and stuff like that. There was no real conflict. Superman and Bizarro, they wouldn't touch each other. Maybe he'd stop a train, but it had no real action. Right. And as an artist, I loved that very kinetic energy of the show. And they would be flipping around. They'd be throwing these kicks, like people, they would edit like a guy's blood being shot out of his mouth and stuff like that. But everybody like got to do really cool things on the show. And I had never lost my love for it. Oh, and by the way, if you're interested, they did do a reboot of Gatchaman in the 90s. It was a 3-episode series where they did it from a modern point of view, where they took the old characters and they did them as if they were created then. And it didn't do very well, but I loved it. They had like these really cool costumes. They looked like, as a fan, you could look at it and immediately identify that it was Gatchaman. But it was like with modern animation, and the guy who ended up directing and animating it was a huge influence on me. But if you have any interest, I would recommend you check them out. I mean, I can even send you like there's a theme song that Earth, Wind, and Fire did the song for.
Oh wow!
Yeah, like seriously, like this is an Earth, Wind, and Fire song that when we saw it when we got it, when we first saw it, there was no subtitles or anything like that, but we watched every frame. And then an Earth, Wind, and Fire song comes on, and we're like, that is so cool. It was an original song. And it was only 3 episodes. There was a period with Tatsunoko. We're doing reboots of their classic characters. And they weren't really catching on. But that one I really loved, and it's, if you ever like express an interest in this property, it is worth your time to check it out. Just make sure you watch it subtitled. The English dubs, like nowadays, English dubs are excellent. But this is the time where they would take like lines from the Japanese, and they sound so bad in English because there's no effort being made. It's like, we've got to stop that guy. Like that was like the kind of inflection, and it would just take you out. When you watch those old shows in the original Japanese, those actors are committed. Yeah. No matter how crazy that line is, it's like you're not taken out of the moment. It's
no, those voice actors are phenomenal.
Yeah, like that. You're never like thinking this is really dumb. But when you watch it in English, you're like, this isn't as cool. Like, because there's Gatchaman has something that Cullen does a really good job maintaining, is that there are some lines which can sound kind of stilted, but it's very much like a Gatchaman playbook way of doing things, like the way they kind of announce their attentions. Like, sometimes we are 1, sometimes we are 5. And that might sound kind of goofy in English. When you got that Japanese actor behind it, you're like, yes, sir. I hear you.
It's intense.
Man, save the day. They're fully committed. So, and Cullen has done a really great job maintaining that kind of crazy, weird energy. He doesn't try to westernize to make it an American comic book. That's a really, like, I don't think a lot of writers would have been able to capture that kind of crazy energy of what Gatchaman should feel like. It does help that we are working in conjunction with the Tatsunoko Studios. So if we veer out of the lines, they can always go back here, go back there. But so far, everything's been going really well.
Oh, good. Yeah, I read the issue 0, which was a free comic book day issue, and I read issue 1. Kinetic is a good way to describe it, which I always I always feel that's interesting because we're talking about comic books, we're talking about like static images on a page, but like you do feel that energy, like your art and Carlos Lopez's colors, like, man, it just looks so bright and vibrant and alive on the page.
Yeah, I was doing everything I could to. I mean, yeah, it's a flat image, but it needs to flow. It needs to jump, and I studied a lot of like the really good mangas to see how they managed to like. You ever like I was reading My Hero Academia, and it's a really fun show, and they have crazy battles. But as I was reading the manga, the animated cartoon doesn't have to work that hard because it's literally on the page. How they do these crazy perspectives, and it's all there on the flat image, and it pops. So I did my best to try to embody that because things should feel like it's popping, and if color adds another dimension to it, even better. Yeah. But it's no accident. It's like definitely some trial and error. Like I'm trying some new effects and stuff like that, and I think they're working, so far. And I'm hoping that the fan base really appreciates that. We want it to feel like it shouldn't feel like an American comic book completely. We are, we definitely are an American comic book. And there are times we like manga tends to use less panels, and they tend to be less like in the vein of American storytelling. They're willing to break panel borders and stuff like that. And a lot of times there's a lot of information to convey because sometimes Cullen can have a lot going on the page, and I have to structure it so nothing gets lost. But there is that effort to make sure that it's still coming off the page.
Yeah.
I don't want them to look flat or static. But at the same time, I know you're unfamiliar with the show, but you're starting to get familiar with it. They would never, let's take like an example of Marvel 90s, where the X-Men couldn't just stand around and look relaxed. They always Cyclops had to be like this all the time, muscles rippling.
Right, arms crossed, do the pose.
And when I worked at Marvel, they actually, you couldn't do quiet panels. Even if the script required that, they'd want you to make it really exciting. It's like, but he's having a cup of coffee, like so I have speed lines behind him, an explosion behind him. Yeah. It's like what, and like I remember I did this script where there was just like an accident in the subway, and it's supposed to be somber, but they want me to make it exciting. It's like, I read the script, it's somber, it's and they're like, no, make it bigger, less panels. But the writer asked for that, and oh God, I remember.
That's funny.
Yeah, they were really bad about that. It was like, I always thought that like a good movie, if you put like an action scene in every sequence, when the action finally hits, it's boring. So it's like, I think you pace it nicely, and then when something happens, boom, gets hyperkinetic, and then you wait for those double page spreads and stuff like that. But if you're doing that every page, you're tired by the end of the issue. No pacing.
Right, sure, yeah. You need that. You need that like ebb and flow.
It's the same with writing. You gotta like build, and it's the same with art. And I was studying like a lot of like really excellent manga, and to seeing what they're doing, and like Attack on Titan, you name it, like things like that, like very good to learn from. They learned a lot from us, and they took it and they just flipped it and made it better. So I'm just trying to return the favor, steal from the best.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that makes a lot of sense, especially when you're trying to do, something new, but also kind of capture a very particular look from, really 50 years ago when this came out, 71, 72 in terms of the original anime. I just want to say, in terms of our listeners, if anyone's unfamiliar like me, just to dig into Science Ninja Team Gatchaman, but this is essentially, from what I understand, like one of the first, 5-person fighting team to kind of come together. That was like, this is like the format for really things like Super Sentai.
They were the grand
Power Rangers.
When they broke it down to the colors.
Yeah, Voltron.
Voltron is literally, they took the team template is literally taken from Gatchaman.
Right.
And but that stuck around for a long time in Japan. You had the cool hero. You had the tough guy in the background who was dark and mysterious. You had the girl. You had the little kid. and you had the big guy,
right.
and that stayed for, and but Gatchaman was the one that really perfected that format, and it's still like the best one.
Yeah, I was just looking at the character descriptions online for the original series, but Ken the Eagle, he's the
Mhm.
leader. Joe,
Yep.
the Condor, a race car driver of Japanese Italian descent.
Yep.
Which is great. June, the Swan.
Yes,
Uh,
she's just one.
Jin Pai, the Swallow, and my favorite, Ryu the Owl, a fisherman's son, manager of a yacht
it's
harbor.
Rue. Yeah,
Or
Rue.
Rue, sorry.
No,
Okay,
it's okay.
Rue.
People do it all the time, But yeah, Rue. Yeah, he's a fun one to draw.
Yeah,
He's so much fun.
The name of their ship, I mean, what is it, like the God Phoenix?
The God
Like,
Phoenix. The God Phoenix.
What
In
a
America,
name.
they called it just the Phoenix, but
Right.
I love just God Phoenix. Just that's just badass. And that ship design, it's in the 90s version, it actually does a gorgeous redesign of it that still looks great. But yes, the God Phoenix is a badass ship. Like when I have my own property in mind, which is before Gatchaman came along, I was developing a property, as we all do, and it was very Gatchaman influenced with a lot of Jack Kirby. And so,
okay.
So if I ever get to do it, you're going to see things in there that are deliberately inspired by it. I just didn't think I'd ever be drawing Gatchaman. So, which is I still like going, wow, I get to do this. Like, I get to sit here and bust my ass and try to put everything I can in a drawing Gatchaman. That still boggles the mind.
Well, Chris, you said, you're trying to do some new things, and, in terms of your career, all the different things you've done, and especially being, kind of taught and having like Klaus Janson as a mentor, when you get to do something like this that you loved as a kid, now you're getting to kind of leave your own mark, and really kind of, this is a series now that can reach some of those folks who loved it as a kid, also who probably have like their own kids now, to kind of introduce them to it. What has been the most challenging part of kind of getting into Gatchaman? Was it like defining the style? Was it trying to find a way to leave your own mark on it?
Well, it's funny because there was one thing that I would say we were talking about the look of the show, was that the original show was very much well drawn. If you really look at it, like, they're foreshortening. It wasn't. There are some characters that look very, very exaggerated, but there are others that are just very, despite like bigger eyes and things like that, they had details on it that a lot of American cartoons didn't. They had like this part of the lip and like that between the nose. Like they had more conscious, anatomically correct details, and their characters weren't overly muscular. They actually had more realistic builds and stuff like that. So I come from a long drawing background where we learned that, that's how you draw, like less exaggerated. And it didn't take too long to get the style. I'm not trying to force the style to meet my own, because I was such a huge fan of it. I took a few months to learn, like, to draw the characters over and over again before I had even drawn any pages for it, and which was I thought was a really smart thing to do. I mean, I'm still learning to draw the characters, because it's like I'm hoping that my first issue, and we get to like the sixth issue, I'm hoping you'll see like evolution in there, because I'm trying not to use the same face over and stuff like that. I am trying to always push it, not use the same poses and things like that. And there's a thing in Gatchaman, the original show, where they don't do the posy kind of Marvel 90s thing where everyone's flexing and stuff like that. They actually look their coolest when they were in their really relaxed forms. They actually looked more slick, more lethal, by looking less dangerous, like with less pronounced, and so I'm trying to keep it just as close as I can to the original. And like I screen grab the hell out of it, like the mechanics of the show and stuff like that. So like, let's say for instance, the bad guy is in his lair yelling about, Gatchaman did this. When it comes to the tech and stuff like that, I just try to keep the tech really consistent. I could throw in some modern spins and stuff like that, but for the most part, it's been it's a challenge, but it's a really fun challenge. Like, I try to think in terms of like production design of the original show and try to maintain that flow. So you're not going to see like something that looked like it walked out of Mobile Suit Gundam in the middle of a Gatchaman episode, because as cool as that is, it doesn't match the flow of the show. There's been a couple of things we've had to design. Like in the first issue, there's a giant kind of plant monster, mecha, and I looked at lots of the monsters from the show, and we have to get approval by Tatsunoko. And thus far, like when we submit our first designs, they've been approving them. But I take great care to make sure that they feel consistent with their established universe. And thus far, I mean, it's a challenge, but it hasn't been like ringing my head, because so far they have been approving everything. I'm like, oh, they liked it? Oh, great. So I feel like I've tapped into a good creative vein for it. And they've been very receptive. Their feedback has been really like, it makes you just go running back to the drawing board, because they've been really happy with it. And that's another thing. I'm just scratching my head that the guys at Tatsunoko are actually happy, because there was a show, they did a Battle of Planets comic book about like 10, 15 years ago at Top Cow. And that felt like...
Yeah, Alex Ross was really involved in that, right?
Oh, wow. His covers, it's a shame that Alex couldn't have done the whole thing, because that would have just been like, that's a whole next level. But the book itself didn't feel very faithful to the original show. It seems like they just did they did their own kind of take on it. And I think that's just a bad idea, especially with something that has such a ravenous kind of fan base. It's like, just stick to that. You can bring some modern elements, but they made radical changes to it. And from what I understood from the fan base, they weren't crazy about that, but they sure did love those Alex Ross covers.
Yeah. Yeah, I heard. I did read something, and when I was researching this, that like I think the first issue sold very well, and I would imagine that's a lot based on the fan base and the Alex Ross covers.
Yes. Yeah, they were drawing it in a fashion where, I don't want to like sound like I'm attacking anybody, but they were drawing it in a very kind of anime style, where it was like they weren't really keeping it as consistent with the original show. So it was like, and as we discussed, it was more realistically drawn than you would expect, and it looked like guys who were just doing like an anime take on it, as opposed to just being consistent with the original show. And and since I was always so inspired by the original show, it isn't that much of a challenge for me to keep with it. But the challenge is not to like fall into my own style too much. There's still characters in there. We had to come up with a bunch of new characters for the show. For the comic.
For the comic,
sure. Tatsunoko wanted us to bring in a lot of new elements. Like, that was their insistence, which is always scary, because it's like, but they wanted some new elements to merge with their original show. And there's a bunch of new characters, and Cullen came up with some names and some ideas behind them. And no spoilers here or anything like that. I want you to read it. But we had to submit a lot of designs for it. And I remember spending a weekend being kind of terrified. I'm like, I just have these names. What am I going to do? And they're supposed to be like a reflection of Gatchaman type characters. And so that weekend, I knocked out some headshots, and I was like, okay, screw. All I can say is no, And when at the end of the weekend, I looked at them and I liked them. I'm like, oh, I really hope they like these, because I feel like I got this out of my head. I'd be ashamed not to use them. And then they got back to us, and all were approved, and they needed some costume designs, sent in some designs. They picked one that they really liked. They approved it. And I'm sitting there scratching my head going, they liked it? They're good with that? So,
right.
It's like we're being invited to kind of bring our own personal things to it, but none of them are against the grain of what Gatchaman was about in the first place. But like I said, we are doing it with the blessing and with the nudging of Tatsunoko itself. So nothing that we're doing should make classic fans go, what the hell are they doing? Do they not respect the canon and stuff like that? No. we absolutely respect it. And this is with, like I said, Tatsunoko is behind us all the way, which is so cool.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, I really enjoyed the first issue. I read it.
Oh, so you have read? Oh, that's the zero.
Yeah.
You read the Free Comic Book Day. Yeah,
I read Free Comic Book Day issue 0, but Frank from Mad Cave sent me an advanced review copy of issue number 1. So I read it, and I really liked it. I mean, like I said, it does. It everything. It feels, like I said, kinetic. Everything comes alive. I really thought it was a lot of fun, and I wanted to know more about, like, where is it going to go? Where's these characters? And it's just interesting when I was reading the whole history of the difference between the original series and like Battle of the Planets. One of the things I wanted to ask you, because you have done so many different, you have worked on so many different properties, so many different characters in comics. And one of the things that I thought is interesting about Gatchaman is with their costumes, they have these like beak like face shields. And I'm like, it would seem out of anything else, like even drawing like superhero masks and costumes, that like having to draw a fully realized face and that like face shield over it just on a like workload would be very, very challenging.
Oh, well, you know, it's funny that you said that. It's actually great that you did, because artistically speaking, that helmet, all of their helmets, it's like they look different from every angle.
Yeah,
you know, that like you go this way, it's radically different. It's like I liken it to I did a story for the U.S. Army, and they were hyper meticulous with what I like. Like I had to do stuff that was so accurate to the military details, or I'd have to redraw it. So that meant getting it right in the first place. And there were these American helmets from the Vietnam War. An army helmet, you look at it, looks initially simple. Oh my God. Every single angle you move with that thing, you'd have to get it right. So I was doing screen grabs from movies. That was the nightmare. Those helmets were crazy to get right. But with Gatchaman, it's like I did do like screen grabs from the show, and anytime I saw a different angle, screen grab, screen grab, screen grab, because I needed to understand. Like I have these files where I understand how they look from every angle, and it took a while. Oh boy! And I'm very like when I do a headshot, I go out of my way to make sure that it's accurate. Like, and that's where I've seen with a lot of the Top Cow stuff. These guys, I don't think they had the screen grab option back then, and they probably had limited files. So whenever they did a different shot of it, you could tell they just were trying to just make it up, like how we do that. And like Alex Ross was an absolute genius at it. Like he would have like these low shots where wow, they were just. And I looked at his stuff too, and with a lot of anime, you do a lot of low shots to make characters look really cool, to heighten the scene, and those are tricky as hell. And but I think I'm really getting the helmets down now, you know, and it's still a learning curve. I still always try to throw in a new angle that I haven't drawn, but you're right. It is not quick. It's like, yeah, it's like, oh, it's like you might think it's really simple details because there's no feathering and things like that. But getting that, like, you have to make it look cool. And there's like a double page spread in the first issue where they were jumping down and everything's looking straight up. And some of their helmets are just so awkward. Like they have beaks up to here, you know? And how do you do that? Not make him look ridiculous and still look exactly like the character. And yeah, it took some time. That took some time. But when you hit it, you go, okay, I think I got it. I think I got it right there.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I was thinking, because like I'm just going through it now, going through the digital file here, and especially when they are like all together, like solo scenes, but when you have them all together and they all have their helmets on and it might be like a close-up panel, it just seems like it would be, 3D modeling would be super helpful.
Oh,
you
know, there's Cullen gave me a page. It's an issue 2 where there's like several characters per page, and then there per panel, and there's one panel where it's 10 characters with in one panel, and that's a 5-panel page after having already group shots. And that's a very American comics kind of thing to do. You've got your establishing shot, you've got to set everything up. But there was the last panel where Gatchaman is talking to the other team, and there's 10 of them, and it's like at the low bottom of the page, and I had to make them all interact, and that took forever because it's like you still got to make it look deceptively simple while it's not, and getting there, and also encompassing some body language. Because, like I said, I try to avoid the trap of having the X-Men shots where everyone's flexing and trying to look so cool. You know, Gatchaman doesn't try to look cool. They just like there was this scene where the bad guy in the original show, he thinks he's got them, like he thinks he's got Dr. Nambu, and the lights go off for a second, and the lights come back on, and sitting in front of him is Ken, and instead of Ken looking really super badass, Ken is literally like kicking back. His legs are up like this, and he's kind of like, hey. And it just looked 10 times cooler than having him look overly aggressive. His relaxed posture, his cockiness, he looked that's the kind of thing I want to maintain. Is that these guys like don't need to do that. You know, a lot of manga, they do the hyper exaggerated poses. And mind you, we will have that, but that'll be in the middle of an action scene. But my feeling is that I want them to look like as relatable as to people as they can be. You know, like, oh, look at June. She looks like that. Yeah, girls, like she looks so cool and relaxed. Her body language is giving off her what's going on in her head. You know, that's something that I'm that's a big part of what I try to do as an artist. You know, make the characters pop off the page. I want their personalities to shine.
Yeah, well, I think the first issue, you know, is hugely successful in that regard. Like, I really felt the differences in the personalities. You know, I also really like. I think it's, if I'm looking at it now, it's like page 7 or 8, right? Shortly after that, you know, like full page that you mentioned where the characters are all kind of jumping down. There's like some kind of dynamic action, some fighting scenes. And I just really, you know, you're introducing the team, you know, with G1, G2, and they're all kind of facing off against another group. But I love how angular everything is in terms of the panels. Like it's not only is there a lot of action and movement in terms of the body language and the fight sequences, but you use a lot, like there's a lot of interesting interlocking, overlapping, you know, angular paneling that really kind of moves your eye right along the page.
Thank you for noticing. I mean, I remember when I read that script for that page, like as a fan, I was reading it going, oh, wow, that sounds awesome. And then I started thinking, how the hell am I going to do that? Because it was like you had your introductory shot, which in normal American comics, that would be the double page spread itself right there, you know? And but then there were 5 more panels with each individual character, like they're pairing off in fighting each other. And I remember going, like I can either do it in that 1, 2, 3 kind of panel where I have it up the top of the panel is the double page spread, and then the lower panels would have their individual fights. But as I broke it down that way, it lacked kineticism. It might have been the proper way to tell a story. But Gatchaman is always about the movement. They have these really cool capes. It's like, and the more I made these panels that kind of shifted you, you know, and kept moving the camera around, you know, it took I remember that page was just designing the mechanics of how not to get lost in it. Took a while, but it was like, this is our introductory shot. This has got to kick ass. This has got to sing, and you can't get lost. And yeah, that's something that I'm hoping to continue. There's a double page spread in the second issue where Cullen wrote the script, and I'm like, that's panel 1. You know, we have Godzilla style destruction in these comics, and Godzilla, you can write that down on a page, but when you do Godzilla style destruction, you have to actually put those details in there. So if you've got something big, you need the smaller building to actually have the detail to make it look foundationally solid. And when you're breaking said building, you don't just go bang. And there was a double page spread where something really explosive is happening, and he wrote this great description in it. And I'm like, wait, there's 4 more panels. Oh my God. And I did figure it out, but it still required that kind of like, there was so much going on in these pages that I still was using that panel trick of using these looping panels and panels that take you this way and that way to keep your eye going. And I'm really enjoying doing it, but there is the challenge because you don't want to do it just to do it. You have to make sure you don't lose the eye of the reader.
Oh yeah. I mean that affects the pacing, it affects the overall storytelling. Sure. Is that still is that still fun? The fun of comics for you, that you've done a lot of stuff over the years and you still have to get in there and kind of like figure out how to make that work when you get a script?
It's funny because the entire series is I'm using all the old comic book storytelling tricks that I've learned over the years, and sometimes how to economize storytelling so I'm not dying on every page. But on it seems like a lot of that got thrown out the window because since A, I was super excited that I'm doing this job. B, when I read the scripts, Cullen doesn't pull back. Like they're big epic like action scenes, and you really got to sell that, And I wanted the reader to be like, "Yo, what the hell? This is Gatchaman," I and I ended up putting a lot more work into every page than I thought. Oh, it's going to be anime style. I'll use less details and stuff like that. And in many ways, I'm using just as much detail as I used to do. The characters themselves are less detailed as I normally would do, but I'm using the backgrounds to make them pop out from them. Like they should feel like separate from them, and it helps ground them. And I'm still pushing my as much as I can with these issues. So no, I haven't taken any shortcuts, And I'm making some pages right now where I'm like, why did you do that? Why did you do that? This should be, I did this lab and Cullen wrote this great lab. Like, I'm going to give him everything he asked for. Oh boy, I got to ink that, and I have to draw that. Luckily, it was only one page. So it's like, I actually rationalized it. Okay, I'll just make this lab sing. And thankfully, we're not going back to the scene again. I hope not in the next issue. But yeah, no, I mean, every issue has been a challenge in terms of I don't want to make it seem like it's something I've done before. Like, for instance, there's going to be an enemy base in issue 3, and I don't want this base to look like any of the other previous locations I've done at all. So I do a lot of searching online, and I'm looking at military bases, science labs, nuclear facilities, production design. And I'm going to be making active efforts to make sure you go to a different location. I mean, you can have some similar tech and stuff like that because that's the nature of technology. But I definitely want to make it seem like I am taking great pains to make sure that everything feels distinct of each other. And yeah, that means more time, more challenges. But I'm having so much fun that I look forward to the challenge because there's plenty of comics I've done over the years where I still give 100%. But I'm just not into it. It's like, this is boring.
Sometimes
this is boring.
Sometimes it's just, it's just the job, right? You're just, this is how I'm paying the mortgage. I'm doing it, but it's nice when you're also really excited.
But this is different. It's like, I also know that the guys in Tatsunoko are looking at it. I want them to look at it and go, this guy really cares. He gives a damn. He's giving it his all. So, like I said, by the time we get to issue 5 or 10, I'm hoping you can see an evolution in there where I'm trying to keep pushing it. Like you won't see the same shot of them jumping out, like kicking the guy in the face. I'm, inevitably you might use some, but I'm trying to always keep it fresh, like challenge myself every time. And thus far, Cullen's scripts, he doesn't take the easy way out on me, and nor should he. He's like, okay, here's another fight scene. He'll throw in some great like things where June is kicking someone in the face. Her yo-yo is smacking the other guy in the face. And so I'm thinking, how do I block this and stuff like that? So a lot of times I'm thinking of martial art movies and things like that. And I don't want the action to look like an American comic, like where Superman has a traditional punch. No. It's like, when it comes to like Gatchaman, it'll probably be a lower angle to emphasize that and make it feel like it hits harder, Yeah, that's another word. Yeah. Gatchaman actually, they tend to hit hard. You know, when they hit the bad guy, they don't want him to get back up. They're not slapping the cuffs on him. They're making sure that guy, he quits his job overnight, you know?
That's it.
I don't want to work in this job anymore.
Right. He files for disability. And that's it.
Severe disability. You know, they're putting you out of business. And that was why I loved it as a kid, because it was just like, damn, they are beating the crap out of those guys. You know?
Yeah.
And you watch Super Friends, they're like, you know, Batman didn't hurt anybody. You know, he just talked to them, you know, and no, we don't do that in this comic.
Yeah, I mean, I really like because you're dealing with so many elements. It's not just they're fighting other people. Like, there's also like a mech and like a plant monster. There's all these different things. Like, you're really getting to do a lot of different stuff. And all the vehicles, and especially like the God Phoenix and like how that operates. And there's so many different fun, exciting, you know, elements to this. Yeah, I definitely was like looking. I think there's like a anime streamer or website like High Dive or something along those lines, where you can get a subscription to it, and they have, I think, like however many episodes of the original Gatchaman. And I was like, I want to watch this now. The comics got me excited for the show, and I want to read more of the comic. It was just a lot of fun.
I think as long as you can accept that it was the 70s, and there will be some really goofy, there's some goofy stuff in some of the crazy stuff, but there is some stuff you're just gonna have to go, okay, that was a goofier episode, and just as long as you can accept that, it's a blast, because there are elements in the show where there was an episode where, and I forgive any kind of spoilers, but the enemy goes for their secret base, and this was not ever done in the American version. And there's a couple episodes where they hint they're going to get the good guy's base, but there was like 2 episodes, and they didn't do too many episodes that were 1 and 2 connected. But there are 2 episodes where the bad guys literally take out the good guy's base, and it's so heartbreaking. And when I was rewatching this, because I was like, oh, this is messed up. It's like, it's dark. There are people fleeing. There's scientists that are just like, we've got to save all this information. And Gatchaman's like, no, you've got to go. We'll take care of this. And they're like, no, we're standing our ground. And like, at one point, Ken hits this guy in the stomach so he can knock him out so he can save his life. And I was like, this is dark. And they lose. The good guys lose in this episode. And they lose big time. And you're like, they wouldn't do this in an American show. So forgive the spoiler. I guess you have to watch the episode anyway. But it was dark and serious, and it's like, and the last episodes of the show, like everything, like it's like a freight train at that point, and it gets ultra serious, but you're so invested in the characters at that point that you'll be. I highly recommend it. It's really awesome. You know, watch it subtitled. Do not watch Battle of the Planet.
Okay, definitely.
You want all of that good stuff in there. You know, we'll get to the episodes. Don't worry. We'll send you a link.
I mean, after seeing the comparison between the 2 on YouTube, I was like, I want to see the original. But back to the comic. I think it's so fun, the comic itself. But I just love the idea of Mad Cave, doing this and like finding something like this that was beloved and kind of taking it and not really like reinventing it, but giving it like new life. Like it feels like it, with the little bit I know from the series, feels like such a love letter to the original series. And at the same time, kind of breathing like new life and new interest into, Gatchaman. And I love things where, you something from your childhood that you can now try and like let your kids check out. Like maybe they'll like it, maybe they won't. Everybody's tastes are different. But that idea of being able to like share that, and especially like with comics, because it's so fun to do that. I think it's great. So I'm super excited.
Mad Cave, like with all their licenses, it's like there's some really beloved gold that they have in their hands, and I like Flash Gordon, Dick Tracy. I love what they're standing for. It's like they're giving some of the fun that Marvel and DC are forgetting to do. It's like, look at what G.I. Joe and Transformers are doing right now. those are great. So there's definitely life in these properties if you treat them with love and care. And when I read like the initial outline for that was planned, I was like, oh wow, that's really big. And then I read the adjusted outline, which got even better. There's an arc. The whole thing is it's 25 issues. The storyline is actually mapped out for 25 issues.
Wow.
And it's one ongoing story, and which is great. And there is an actual arc where the seeds are already set up in the first issue. And when I read that, I was like, this is okay. This is very impressive. I love that. It doesn't, as Cullen put it in his treatment, was that we're dancing in between the episodes of the original series, and we're inserting like things in there, and we're not going to be contradicting things. We're like, oh well, that guy died in that episode, but he'll be back. We're definitely incredibly faithful, but those new elements, as you read in the first issue, that is a new element, and it's a new element that is going to be an important part of the ongoing narrative. And having to design that new element, oh my God, like when I was telling you about like the fear of having, oh Chris, here's some names, these are the characters, let's have them, different diversities, and let's go. And the fact that they actually approved the first designs, like they've actually been approving all my designs, but I'm meticulous with trying to keep it consistent with the show and somewhat modern elements as well. And we there is a plan for those guys, and it's like I want to be able to do all of that, because it's like I think it's going to surprise people and fans of the old show as well. We'll see just how much effort Cullen puts in there to maintain that. Like I wish Cullen was here, because like I'm always praising him for how this is a difficult job to write. Like this is such a different property than Transformers and things like that, because you have to take into account the Japanese taste, which are such a fundamental part of what Gatchaman's about. You can't take it and just Westernize it. You're going to miss a vital element, and it would miss its heart, And I'm not saying that the show, you can watch it and it's so distinctly Japanese that you can't relate to it. It's incredibly relatable. It's just that there is that element, that bit of character that he gives it. And when I'm
There's
reading
a sensibility that you really have to capture.
Exactly.
Yeah. Not an easy writing task at all.
And that's like, it's like, wow, that's. Because I could see a great writer not being a good fit for this, because they would probably try to impart too much of their own sensibility. And this is a property that sensibility speaks for itself. You shouldn't try to impose your will. Just like artistically, I'm not going to try to like make it mine. I'm sure it'll evolve a little bit with my style, but for the most part, I'm delighted. I don't want to change those elements. I go out of a way. That gun is accurate. His boomerang, June's yo-yo. I mean, all of that is the car. All of it. It's all like hyper accurate, and that's like completely like me going out of my way to make sure it is, because I want the guys in Japan to read it and go, oh, look at this. This guy really gave a damn about what we love. And I'm hoping that the readers, like, it's the new readers, I'm hoping, I'm curious how they would react. And your reaction to it so far, because you're a relatively new reader to Gatchaman, that's cool. We want that, with Free Comic Book Day, we have 10 pages, at least for our initial story, to make an impression, which is tough. You've got 5 people on a team, earth-shattering monster, and we have to defeat him in 10 pages. And Cullen really nails it. And the last thing I'll say about that was the great thing about what Matt Cave has done with this property is a lot of the spin-offs from it. I was reading the breakdowns from them. They're excellent. Like, they're so smart that I wish I could draw them all. It's like, it's impossible, but I'm like, oh, that's so cool. That's really good. It's not like you're going to see Gatchaman meets Dick Tracy. There's not going to be anything like that where they Americanize it so much. Where it's like, oh, we need team ups. It's like, no, Gatchaman's Gatchaman. We don't need to team up with anybody. We're just going to leave that alone.
But they do have great creative teams, though. I mean, you and Cullen, and then I think one of the other offshoots or one shots is being done by Steve Orlando.
Oh,
and
yeah, he's
Kath
great, too.
Lobo. I mean, so yeah, Mad Cave's really doing a great job to put some great talent behind these series, and I thought it was great. I really enjoyed it. I can't wait to see where it goes. I hope it finds the fans that love the original. I hope it finds a new audience, because I just thought it was a lot of fun, and it made me curious about the original series. So yeah, I think it's very successful issue 1. So I'm looking
Thank
forward
you.
to more.
Well, Steve, I read his outlines. He's writing one series from the bad guy's perspective, and that's tricky. But Steve's crazy, and he knows what he's doing. And there's a lot of great stuff. And normally I see sometimes people get a property and they kind of milk it to death from like day one. They don't let the property just breathe and be itself. And there was that slight worry just because I've seen it done with so many other properties. But when I read all of the breakdowns and the offshoots, they were so smart and so true to the properties. I was like, wow, that one shot sounds great. That other one shot sounds all right. Like Rue has a one shot that I love it. It's so true to his character. And with the spinoffs that Steve's doing, they're really smart. They're really cool. They're great at world building, the overall other side of Gatchaman. And I think at some point these elements are going to blend into the main book, and I can't wait. They really gave a damn about what they were doing with this, and they came at it with some really great ideas, and Tatsunoko wanted that. They wanted that kind of approach, and they got a great team here.
Yeah, I agree, and I'm really excited for folks to start reading it and to hear what people say about it. But Chris, this has been fantastic. Thank you so much for coming on
welcome.
the podcast. I think Gatchaman issue number 1, Cullen Bunn, Chris Batista, Carlos Lopez, Buddy Bedoin will be in stores June 26th. And yeah, I think you should get it, read it. If you can, still try and track down the free comic book day issue 0.
Yeah, I heard
it is
gone.
a great little introduction to what you're going to find in the main book. But I really thought it was wonderful, and this has been great. Like, especially hearing about some of the challenges of putting it together, and always think it's interesting. Something interesting and a little daunting to have to take something that you loved as a kid and now kind of stay true to it and put your own spin on it. So this has been wonderful.
You say daunting. I'll make it quick. I know you're gonna run. There was terror of doing it, because
Okay.
like I was like, oh my God, like I got my dream gig. Now I have to do it. I'm getting over the terror now. I'm getting more comfortable, and like I said, the feedback from Tatsunoko and Chaz, the editor, has been wonderful. Guys at Mad Cave have been it's been overall just an incredibly rewarding experience. It's been very different from DC and Marvel, where you just do your job and then okay, where's the next pages? Like there's so much more personality, and they all care so much, and everyone's working their butts off. And so now my fear is subsiding, and now I'm at that stage where I'm like, oh, you like that page? That's a challenge accepted. So that's why you will keep seeing me push myself as much as possible. I'm not going to phone any of this in, and I hope that the fans will see that.
Well, I mean, yeah, I think they will. Issue number 1 already. There is just so much in there to dig into. So, kudos, because I can't wait to see when we're 10 issues in what you continuing to push yourself looks like, because I really thought issue number 1 was great. So
thank you very much. I really appreciate that.
Yeah, and I appreciate you being here. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. Listeners, be sure to pick up Gatchaman number 1, June 26th. You'll be able to make sure, call your local comic book shop and add it to your pull list. I think this episode, we're recording it now Memorial Day weekend, but it's probably going to drop before the issue is out. So you'll be ready to tell your comic book shop to make sure you get it. Shout out to my brother Bobby, the Cryptid Creator Corner's #1 most dedicated listener. Bobby listens to all my episodes, gives me feedback, and Bobby buys a lot of comics. So I keep so listeners, you're gonna have to listen to me shout out my brother for a little while longer because he's picking up the issues that he likes, and so far he tells me I'm doing a good job interviewing people because he keeps buying their comics. So thanks, Bobby.
I've had a blast. Yeah, this has been. I love this. You know, if you ever want to do it again, you let us know.
Oh, I will. Absolutely, Chris. This has been fantastic. But the Chris Batista for Gatchaman #1. And listeners, thank you very much for listening, and have a good weekend. And I'll see you next time.
Peace out, yo.
This is Byron O'Neill, one of your hosts of the Cryptid Creator Corner, brought to you by Comic Book Yeti. We hope you've enjoyed this episode of our podcast. Please rate, review, subscribe, all that good stuff. It lets us know how we are doing, and more importantly, how we can improve. Thanks for listening.
If you enjoyed this episode of the Cryptid Creator Corner, maybe you would enjoy our sister podcast, Into the Comics Cave. Listen and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.